again.
Okay, good to know. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being on this call tonight. We really do have a special guest. When I met Alex, it was actually at the Olympia for the first time. Is that correct, Alex?
Yep.
He was there helping a bunch of the guys getting ready for Mr. Olympia, and he was friends with Matt Jensen, who you guys all know. And I heard him speaking, and then I must have asked you about 100 questions, because if anyone has me describe you, I say you're probably the smartest person I know. And half of the time I understand you, and half of the time I honestly don't. And then I have to go Google it. But for that half of the time, it's really impressive, the information that you're able to articulate to others. So thank you for being on this call. Guys, you can literally ask him anything about strength, performance, you name it, nutrition. I do have a list of questions prepared thanks to Coach Parker. He got it going for us. So we're going to start there. If any questions come up, then type them in the comments below versus putting your hand out, just to make the most use of our 30 minutes. Alex, do you want to just do like a 2-minute background on who you are for everybody, and then we'll get into it?
Yeah, sure. So I personally started off in the bodybuilding community, and then spilled over into powerlifting strongman, and then just kind of blew up into the NFL, NHL, NBA. Had 23 people at the Paris Olympics last year, reversed CKDs, every form of cancer besides a stage 4 neoblastoma, healing broken bones in like 10 days type things. I tore my quad, recovered that. It was grade 3 tear, recovered that in 4 weeks. Literally just started doing this because I loved it. Got my master's, was going to go for my PhD, and then business just kind of took off. People were throwing money my way. So it's like, let's see if this makes anything. And that was like 13 or 14 years ago. And then after the Paris Olympics last year, things really blew up, and I never wanted to travel for work. I'm like, I got 3 kids, a 4th one on the way. I don't want to leave my family. I just want to be with my kids and my wife. And my wife's like, no, you're kind of too big now. Like, you kind of have to push into it. And, like she always said, like, I was meant to help the world. And I never really knew what that meant until last year happened. And so started traveling, started meeting people like Natasha, and like things are just blown up. So I'm just grateful to be here and just truly happy to be able to do what I do.
Can you repeat how many Olympic athletes you worked with at the Paris Olympics?
Yeah, 23 people. And then we had 2 gold, 1 silver, 3 bronze.
Okay. And then how many athletes, like NFL, NHL, all that? You kind of went over that a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, what's the roster?
So as of right now, I have a total of 97 NDA signed. So between the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, I just started working with some of the professional soccer players. It's kind of scattered across all the big professional sports. So a little bit everywhere.
Okay. So there you go. Get a pen and paper out now, if you don't have one. Okay. So we're going to start. And with our first question was this, obviously started in bodybuilding. What is the biggest training and nutritional principles? This is a loaded question, actually, now that I'm reading it. You answered how you would like, Alex. Training and nutritional principles from the world of that endurance athletes can apply to improve their performance. You go with however you want to go.
I like how it's worded, because to me, it's not even so much the sport specifics. It's the individual specific, right? So if your baseline nitrogen, so baseline protein, right? If you look at everything in our body, so glycoproteins, receptors, just a bunch of amino acids spun together, right? So you understand how basic protein is. We all kind of get that, right? A gram per pound of body weight. But even across the endurance communities, you could slowly work that up based on your recovery rates. So certain individuals in the endurance world, like the cyclists and the marathon athletes I work with, will work their protein up and see where that recovery curve ends. So in the bodybuilding world, it's like, hey, eat as much protein as you can. But in reality, kind of in the athletic world, it's how much protein do you actually benefit from. So you kind of start with that gram per pound and slowly work up based on your response. If you're not getting more recovery out of that nitrogen, then you don't really need any more, but don't be stuck to that 1 gram per pound, because that's what's said in the research, because everyone's so different. So you set your protein, right? That's pretty common. We go over into the fats, and especially in the endurance community, remember, we are first trying to fuel. We are trying to have that whole kind of 2 fuel theory, right? Back in the day with John Pearl and all that kind of fun stuff. We're trying to be able to use glucose now, and then fatty acids later on. So what we're trying to get really good at is driving our own body's ability to pull fats from adipocytes or from fat cells, push it to the liver, hit beta hydroxybutyrate to the brain, produce our own endogenous ketones. So as an endurance athlete, in reality, you should kind of have a high amount of everything, right? You should have high amount of protein, pretty high amount of fats, pretty high amount of carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are obviously that fuel right now. So with those built up intramuscular glycogen stores, so you just have more fuel to run off of. Once those fuel sources get low, even if you're in competition and you're sucking on your gels and drinking all your stuff, you still have those momentary lag times between fuel sources. So then having a slightly higher fat intake kind of delays that, right? So then you just have less to burn, or rather more to burn, but you're having two fuel sources. So to me, it's actually funny. Like if you look at nutrition for athletes as a whole, it's actually pretty similar across the board between all sports. It more comes down to the individual. The only difference is in this endurance community is your intakes are going to be higher, almost regardless of any other athletic spectrum out there, because you're just doing so much. But then the problem with saying that is higher for you is going to be different, higher for Melissa or Rob or, Mackenzie. Like everyone's going to have a different level of what their high level is. So to me, I think in that, endurance community, don't be afraid to push the calories, really see what you can get away with and see, how much you can actually recover from. Because at the end of the day, if you can't recover, then you can't progress.
Awesome. Yeah, we just had that conversation at camp today to not be afraid of fueling. So that was great to lead into that. Thank you. So the next question, and we're going to jump across all of the board here, but strength training for athletes. We've actually had a couple strength coaches on the call recently. But how should triathletes incorporate strength training into their routine without negatively impacting their endurance work? How would you address that?
So how I usually do it with my athletes is we look at total recovery, right? So priorities. So you're an endurance athlete first and foremost. But remember, just because you're getting very glycolytic, so those glycolytic fibers, those longer endurance-based fibers, that doesn't mean you can't benefit from the alactic world. So essentially, if you get better at your weaknesses, so in chemistry, it's Le Chatelier's principle, right? So you take your weakness, you make that better, it potentiates your strength. So if you get better at your weakness, which is basically strength, that's going to improve how you recycle ATP pools and how you replenish those ATP pools. So by you just adding in 1 or 2 strength sessions per week, you're going to improve your endurance work dramatically. Not just how you deliver oxygen, but how you handle carbon dioxide, how you handle lactate metabolism, pretty much everything. But again, your goal is not to try and be the powerlifter, bodybuilder, whatever. It's to be the endurance athlete, right? So it's still, that's the priority. And then work back from there based on what you think you have access to in your week to then not, hit too hard on that recovery factor. Usually it's about 1 or 2 sessions of strength training per week because you guys are usually doing so many other things as well.
Awesome. We had a big discussion about creatine today. In your words, what are the benefits of creatine for athletes, but then also just the general public where people just not aware of it? Because everyone should be taking creatine, I would suggest, right? So can you talk about creatine for a second?
Yeah, as athletes, so you kind of look at a couple of different, so every supplement drug, whatever, there's primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary action. So top 4 you're looking at, right? They do a bunch of other things as well. In this with creatine, though, it recycles those ATP pools fast. It does that super well. What else does it do? It does a good job at storing. So it actually enhances how you actually store glucose as intramuscular glycogen. So you're storing more glycogen. On top of that, it also has indirect abilities to improve how you handle CO2. So carbon dioxide is awesome because the whole Bohr effect, right? BOHR, remember that? That's how it's able to deliver oxygen to tissues. So having a high ability to handle oxygen doesn't matter as much as you having a high CO2 capacity. That's what actually allows you to utilize your oxygen properly. That's kind of like the third big one, right? And then the fourth would be just the ability to buffer a lot of lactic acid. It can drive that pretty dang well. You pair that with like sodium bicarb and some other supplements out there, and you're adding, minutes before you're actually getting any kind of like lactate burn or anything like that. So to me, from like the athletic side of things, and this kind of goes back to like not being a slave to the research, because I love research. I read every paper out there, every book, but athletes are so unique. Finding a study is doing anything that you guys are doing out there. And it's very few and far between where athletes are really crushing it 1,000% every single day with nutrition, training, everything. So we start off generally in the female with about 5 grams and in the male with about 10. You slowly work up by 5. Same thing, give it a week, 2 weeks. You're trying to find that bell curve response to where you get more effect, and then it's going to drop off. And then more is not going to be better, or you have kind of like gastric distress. But that number is going to be different for everyone. Like I personally use like 20 to 30 grams per day. Some of my Olympic athletes, and these were crazy numbers, by the way. I talked about this on Mark Bell's podcast last year, but some of my Olympic athletes worked upwards of 100, 150 grams of creatine, not daily, but we would do that at a day, like as we were peaking for a competition. Again, that's not the majority of people, but the range is 5 grams, like 150 grams. So people can really work these up, even if it's 20 or 30 grams. You're getting that much more of a return on your investment than what you typically see in the research. And you see it especially, so what will happen, it's super interesting, if you are hitting a hormonal threshold, because creatine can also drive some positive androgenic changes just endogenously. Females will get that DHT-based acne. So their performance will go like crazy, but they'll drive so much DHT, they'll get that acne on the jawline. Males will start losing their hair a little bit. They'll start having a higher libido, higher sexual functioning, all the traditional DHT side effects. So depending on how you respond to it, you can almost get like a minor anabolic effect out of it. It's pretty noticeable for a lot of people. And that's just for the athletes out there. You can use creatine, like, again, because I just said I was traveling for a week. So I got 12 hours of sleep from, it was a Thursday to a Tuesday. And I did 3-day seminar, Mind Pump podcast, like all that kind of fun stuff. And one of my protocols for making that circadian shift and having sleep debt was I would work up my creatine and melatonin. So creatine was worked up to 50 grams a day, and then melatonin was upwards of 100 milligrams a day. Because what creatine does amazingly well upon waking after sleep debt, it clears neuroinflammation. So when you sleep, that's your lymphatic system, right? It cleans your brain. It processes all that crap from the day, all those plaques and proteins. Creatine can basically bridge the gap for that higher dose in the morning after you have sleep debt. And that's just, again, and you can look at every single organ system out there. Creatine for liver, kidneys, heart, it's all beneficial, unless if you have like a renal disease. So if you have any GFR in your blood work of like 45, probably don't want to take it, probably want to put on your protein, but that's not this crowd. So creatine kind of wrapped up and summarized, that's where I put it. Pretty cool supplement and super cheap, right?
Yeah. And it's crazy just to hear you speak about that. And just think of research over time. It's like we could only take 60 grams of carbs. Now we can take 120. And there are people taking 140, 150. And you're hearing you can take more protein. And then to hear we thought like 5 grams. So to hear you talk about that today, I obviously don't know what I'm talking about. And so I'll be coming to you for future questions on that. We have a lot of people asking questions. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's tough too, because if you just follow the research, you're going to be 5 or 10 years behind. So like everything I do in my world, I try to be 5 or 10 years ahead of everyone else and everything else. And that also means that you got to do a lot of guesswork and a lot of biofeedback. So although something will work a certain way on paper, how are the athletes responding? How are you responding? Because that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. So we do have a couple questions. I'm going to go to them. And this was a good one. Are essential amino acids beneficial for intra-workout during long endurance sessions? What are your take on that?
Absolutely amazing. Yeah. So whenever we're training, if we're trying to think about it like a ditch, we're trying to dig a little ditch, not a huge hole that we're never going to be able to recover from. So we want a little bit of catabolism going on. We don't want a bunch of proteolysis. We don't want to just break down extra protein to break down extra protein. So essential amino acids can blunt that. So it's just blunting excessive proteolysis. And again, usually about 5-ish grams for females, about 10-ish grams for males, usually a pretty good sweet spot. You can go higher than that, but starting off there is a good range.
Great. And then are there any negative side effects from taking too much creatine? I know you touched on it a little bit, but I don't know. That's one of the questions. Downside to taking too much creatine.
You'll know right away, because it's a very specific kind of defecation where you go to the bathroom, you poop, and it's literally like, you can't believe that came out of you. Those are the creatine poops. Everyone knows about them. If you go too high, you have that, or the stomach distress. That's too much creatine. We want to pull back on the dose, usually by 5 grams. So if you're working up by 5 grams, let's say Mackenzie gets to 20 and then she has the creatine problems. Okay, go back to 15. She's good to go type thing. Other than that, there's really no other problems as long as there's no other pre-existing renal problems. Otherwise, creatine is pretty safe all around. You can, again, like I said, if you do respond well on the hormonal side of things, you get a little too much DHT, and then you can have some other negative side effects. Again, hair loss for males, usually the acne on the jawline for females. But again, things that are super common. And you see it, you stop it right away, pretty much good to go, it reverses.
And on EAAs, is there a thing where it's kind of just, go ahead.
No, not so. So essential amino acids, just parts of nitrogen compounds and nitrogenous compounds. The only thing we could probably say is maybe if you don't respond well to the artificial sweetener or the flavor, then you get kind of that GI distress during the training session itself. But other than that, they're pretty much side effect free, which makes them really awesome.
I've got more questions on creatine. When should you take creatine during the day? Can you mix it with water and drink, or does it lose efficacy when dissolved?
Perfectly fine dissolved in water. I like to start everyone intra-workout, because that's when you need to just be storing more intramuscular glycogen, and you're also replenishing ATP pools. If you get to a point where you're like, okay, let's say 20 grams or whatever, you're amazing there. You want to try kicking up a little bit more, kind of see what you need more. Do you need more of a driver on performance? You'd add more pre-workout. If that's good and you need more recovery, you do it post-workout. So you can kind of pick and choose. Do I want more ATP pool recovery? Do I want more glycogen synthesis? Or do I want more intra-workout recovery? So you can kind of pick and choose and divide up that way. And you just put it in your intra-workout shake or post-workout shake, and you're pretty good to go.
And then a lot of these people on these calls take 5 grams a day. How would you suggest they work up their creatine take? For female versus male, is it different?
So usually males will start off with 10 grams, females will start with 5, and they'll both work it up by 5 grams, usually every week or 2 weeks. The biggest thing is we don't want to like work up arbitrarily. We want to keep a notebook or some kind of feedback marker where we can say, hey, this is working. Like I'm getting better performance. I'm feeling better. My libido's better, sleep's better. You'll see kind of all these cool effects from creatine. And once you stop seeing that, or you have the stomach problems, that's you kind of say, okay, I'm going to push it a little bit higher. And then, okay, no, definitely not. And then you pull back.
Understood. And this was asked in the question before, but just for clarity, does it matter if you mix creatine in yogurt or something like that?
No, nope, that'd be more than fine.
Okay.
We just don't actually want to leave our creatine like sit in, like you don't want to put it in your intra-workout shake and let it sit overnight type thing because they have a pH-based problem.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that at all. Sophie wrote here, thoughts on the new ISSN creatine research that was published. Do you know of that?
Was that the one on heart failure patients? No, that was the muscle fiber one. Was that the one?
Yeah. Yes.
I believe so.
Yeah.
She said, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you read all research, I never like reading the conclusions. Go back into the research and read the methods and how they actually did things. And they break down these compounds so amazingly well. So in all these supplement studies, they're literally telling you what they're looking for and what this compound has the potential to do. To me, I care less about the conclusions because that was for that specific subset of that specific individual that they were testing. So in the creatine-based world, they were finding a lot of positive changes on the alactic and glycolytic fiber type transformation side of things. So if you're trying to be the powerlifter or the marathon runner, you're seeing both of those fiber type transformations being very applicable with creatine.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to switch topics here for a second. One of the questions was, you've studied longevity and corporate wellness. What are some key strategies endurance athletes should implement to extend their careers and maintain long-term health?
So I would love to say fasting in the right scenario, nothing crazy, once a week, 24 hours, something like that. The problem with that is you're into a fueling problem and a recovery problem. So usually in endurance, we can't do that. So if we still scroll back in our heads and say, okay, how can we get, because why would we fast in the first place? Basically to clear up the cellular debris. So although you can push to 72 hours, something like that, and push like the liver-based changes, a lot of things happen in the first like 12 hours. Your mitochondria, the damaged mitochondria start to get recycled and pushed out. Endurance athletes, what are you guys doing? You are crushing your mitochondria. So any mitochondrial support and recycling of mitochondria is one of the best things you guys could be doing. So in this kind of longevity space of being the endurance athlete for 70, 80, 90, 100, 130 years old, whatever you want to be, to me, that should bring the mitochondrial action players. So you can't fast, so take a supplement that mimics a fast. Urolithin A is a really cool one because that's going to recycle damaged mitochondria. Then fatty 15 is another cool compound, which is basically going to drive that AMPK cascade. And that's going to also basically clear out a lot of cellular debris. It does a lot of other cool things as well in the longevity community. But in terms of being the best athlete you can be, you're looking at cellular health and then mitochondrial health. So urolithin A and then fatty 15 are two basic ones to bring in.
How do you spell that? Let me write that in the chat so people can look that up. The urolithin, how do you say that?
URO.
URO.
LITHIN.
T.
Urolithin.
URO.
Here, can I put it in the chat?
Yes, you do that.
Chat at? Where's this chat at? I'm like trying to spell it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Awesome. Okay. And then to follow up on that question, it says, is fast there? Thank you. Okay. Is fasting recommended for women as well? Is there a difference for men and women in that?
There is in the general population community. In the athletic community, females could almost be closer treated as male counterparts because women are just, so the biggest difference is it's called liver sexuality if you want to read the research. And at the liver hepatic base changes from an estrogenic standpoint means you're going to cleave supplements, drugs, and hormones differently than males. But the problem is when your energetics are that of an athlete, it kind of abolishes that. So you can almost be treated the same. You're more looking at body weight based changes and personal responses. So males and females, I mean, it gets more and more different once you have different changes in menstrual cycles, when you have different changes in the hormonal profiles. But at the same time, they can almost be thought of as treated the same, usually still with a lower dosage of, a supplement, for example. But you don't see that track with training volume, right? I know a lot of women that blow training volume out of the water for a lot of guys, but it's so person specific. So I think it more comes down to the individual for a lot of cases.
Awesome. Very good. Question. You touched on it a little while ago. After travel, you've lost sleep, you're tired. Like, how do you recommend people get recovered as quickly as possible? Yeah, after long days. You just mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah. So obviously for you, have a couple refeeds back-to-back days where you're very hypercaloric. Just start driving that whole recovery-based process, number one. Number two, try and get a nap in if you can every day. So if you can only get whatever your set hours are at night, because we all have, families, work, like things like that, like responsibilities like adults do, try. If you can't squeeze in just an extra hour of sleep, it's going to help you dramatically. If you can get some products out there, like Carbon 60 is a really cool one. You can actually pair that with like PQQ and some other supplements. It's going to drive that lymphatic system, so you get more recovery at night from your sleep. So let's say you sleep 8 hours, you'll get the recovery of like 12 hours of sleep. So you can do some little players and things like that to start driving recovery up a little bit more. Usually things like that. And then if you can deload, so from training, literally just don't train for 2 or 3 days, take off, or use that extra time to sleep, recover. Usually it's small little things like that help big time.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have any keys we have some athletes going to go train or race at altitude. How can you adapt to altitude maybe quicker? Are there any tricks that you know?
Actually, yeah. So we were talking about the carbon dioxide management therapy. And to me, usually if you can manage your carbon dioxide better, it allows you to adapt to altitude even faster. So if we're looking at, increasing our ability to handle carbon dioxide, start doing breath holds. That's one of my favorite things to do. Again, so what we're trying to do is on the exhale, you breathe out. On the exhale, you hold. What that hold does is your spleen will contract. Your spleen contracts, it'll dump erythropoietin and red blood cells into the bloodstream. So you're trying to hold that breath hold as long as you can, and until you feel like the urge to breathe. So you'll feel like a flick in your chest, your throat kind of like quivers. That's when you resume normal breathing, all nasal. And you do that a couple times. We're trying. So most people can only do a breath hold initially for 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You'd want to be able to work up to like a minute and a half of holding on the exhale. And that's going to slowly improve your hematology panel. So you're going to deliver carbon dioxide and oxygen better. So doing those breath holds is amazing. And then obviously nasal breathing. So whenever you're training, you should only be nasal breathing. When we nasal breathe, it's hitting the lower portion of the lungs, right? If you're mouth breathing, it's that heavy upper chest breathing. You're just wasting oxygen, versus getting it all the way circulating down through the lungs, picking up some blood along the way, and driving that carbon dioxide displacement throughout the whole body. So usually nasal breathing during your workouts and doing breath holds throughout the day. And you could also do, Carbogenetics has a really cool CO2 inhaler machine. I use it all the time for myself. Actually, you can use it to, kill off tumors. You can use it to just drive overall recovery. You can use it to drive anabolism, use it for a ton of different things. You can buy those actual machines and literally just inhale a low percentage of carbon dioxide. That'll also get you very efficient.
Wow. Okay, we have a question on heat training. Best way to incorporate that for training in your experience?
Like sauna type therapies.
Yeah.
So I like both, not just the heat exposure, but the cold exposure. So for two different reasons, in the heat-based world, if we're jacking up that temperature, we're uncoupling proteins and receptors to a massive extent. Many things as well, but to me, that's kind of the coolest thing. So men and women, everything's based on that endogenous hormonal environment, right? So all of us have testosterone, estrogen, all that fun stuff. They are binding to receptors, and they're going to undock and go find another receptor to bind to. So you're trying to improve how your own body uses your natural testosterone levels. That heat exposure will cause that uncoupling to go, and it'll send a signal to dock, go to the next receptor faster and faster. So the heat therapy does a lot of cool things to improve your endogenous hormonal production. The cold therapies actually do some really cool things. They'll actually, one of the biggest things I love in the mitochondria. So our mitochondria, just from walking around in the sun all day or whenever we're getting our sun exposure, our body, our mitochondria will trap infrared light. So whenever you expose it to cold therapies, it'll literally uncouple and release all that infrared light. So that infrared light endogenously released in our cells is going to heal you globally extremely well. So both heat and cold therapies have a tremendous amount of validity. Usually the heat therapies you can kind of do whenever, like pre-training, post-training, end of the day, there's really kind of no negative interference. In the cold therapy-based world, if we're doing it around the peri-workout window, so pre-workout by a couple hours or post-workout, it's going to blunt the inflammation from that training session. And it could be good if you're like 2 weeks out from competition, but if you're trying to create an adaptation, which is in the off season, we don't want that, because then we want that inflammatory hypertrophic based process, because we want to be able to adapt from it. But other than that, they're two awesome therapies.
Awesome. Very good. We had a conversation about grounding when we were in Vegas. Can you talk about that? Some people are like really into it, and some people have never heard about it and the importance of it.
It's so cool. So again, it's funny because this is where everyone goes like, oh, the woohoo tinfoil hat stuff. But I mean, it's literally just science and biology. So look, so anyone can just do this example. Go find your socks you just wore today and smell them. They probably stink pretty bad, right? Because the bottom of our feet have the biggest portion of our body. So we sweat more through our feet than any other portion of our body, right? We know that by our smelly shoes and smelly socks. What we do when we stand on the ground is those pores will actually dilate and it'll pull a lot of those endotoxins through our feet. So number one, you're clearing all the damage you're accumulating at a cellular level. Number two, why do we eat fruit? Fruit has what? Antioxidants, right? Everyone likes to eat it for health. Antioxidants literally mean that they're donating electrons to our body. Those electrons can then go to those unpaired electrons and basically fuel cells. Grounding, the earth literally just donates electrons to our body through our feet. So you're literally, it's just like, kind of like you're eating fruit, just a different way to look at it. All you're doing is donating electrons. So grounding as a whole is so cheap. Like I have one of the grounding mats right here. So I always have my feet on them when I'm indoors, because at least I'm getting a little bit, well, my cords are getting screwed up. Either way, at least I'm getting a little bit of electron donation through there. It's obviously not the same thing as being outside. You're not getting the same detox profile, but still a little extra electron donation. It's not going to hurt anyone. And you'd notice I notice a pretty big difference in the vast majority of my clients just by getting the grounding mats. But if you ground outside, you get pretty much a tenfold increase, because it's not just the ground, the electron donation, it's everything else. Go outside in nature and try not to smile. Like just smelling in the air, getting the sun, getting that, so the sun will go through your eyes. It'll go to that suprachiasmatic nucleus. It'll activate something called brain and muscle aryl hydrocarbon receptor nuclear translocator like protein 1. And that'll drive everything downstream to literally turn your brain on for the day to say, hey, wake up. Hey, fire. Hey, do this, do that. So just being out in the sun, it's so beneficial for you. Like when I'm outside here, we have a really cool neighborhood, but our backyard, there's like always this pair of squirrels just going at it. And so I'm outside, just breathing in the air, getting the sun. And I always look, these squirrels just having the best time. Like, try to be out there and try to not smile. Like, it just puts you in a good mood for multiple reasons.
Awesome. I have two more questions. One came in from Brian. Is it accurate that the fastest way to cool the body is through palm of the hand? So obviously, Alex, we race in like 90 to 100 degree temperatures and sometimes an Ironman. How can we cool ourselves off? What do you recommend? Some of us hold ice, put it in the hat, put it in the groin. Any tricks?
Usually you're looking at carotid, and then you're looking right at your wrist, right at that actual vein right there. And then you can also test yourself for dehydration, like the tent test. So you'll put your hand up and you'll pinch your skin. And if it shoots right back down, then you're not that dehydrated. If it kind of stays tented for even like a split second, then it comes down, dehydration levels are starting to creep up and you're probably already too late, but at least you know that that's a problem. You can pound some fluids and get some electrolytes in.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I actually did that over in the canine community. I learned that over working with some vets and some zoos.
Yeah, I am totally going to be doing that, you guys. So we're telling all of you to do that. I did have a question from one of our athletes. I know she's drinking, let me get the question, molecular hydration water. Have you heard of that? Can you talk about
molecular hydrogen?
Yes. Yeah, it says molecular hydration water.
That's probably it. Yeah, molecular hydrogen.
Okay.
So if you look at hydrogen, imagine it being the most specific antioxidant. So you have these elemental magnesium tablets, you drop them in water, they disassociate, and then you'll get that hydrogen gas as part of that component in water. So you drink down all the gas is still in the water, and it's a very specific antioxidant that's unrelenting. So it will find a cell that's damaged, and it'll just attack it until the reactive oxygen damage in that area is cleared. So all the research, if you guys want to really fall into a rabbit hole, just Google molecular hydrogen water study. And there are literally hundreds these days from every kind of element you can imagine. In the endurance community, take it at the opposite time of your training, just to drive global recovery and repair your immune system. So if you train in the morning, obviously take it at night, because we're not trying to have those at the same time. Same thing before with the cold therapies, not trying to cause those interfering signals. But yeah, hydrogen water is absolutely awesome. The one from Australia, I believe, is Healer, HEALR. That's my favorite one. It's the highest parts per million at 12, which is really big. Everyone else is like 0.5 or 1. So that's a really good product.
Awesome. So Alex, we are sadly out of time. I feel like we have to have you back because there's so many questions we can ask. I know. Is there a question I haven't asked you? You're like, man, if I could get in front of a bunch of endurance athletes and tell them these one or two things, what would you tell us?
Eat more and sleep more. I mean, seriously, prioritize recovery, because I think the athletic mindset. We all love training. It's all so much fun. And you would think if you worked harder and did more, that you would get better results. And the problem is, all the athletes I work with, like at the Olympic level, it was never a fact that they weren't training enough. No one's lazy. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is working hard. They don't have to work harder. I think it's working smarter and prioritizing recovery. So that could be sleeping more. That could be doing less training. That could be eating more. It could be the molecular hydrogen, all these little therapies, because that's what, like, all the supplements behind me, I have multiple cabinets full of supplements and compounds and stuff like that. It's so that I keep doing more. But if I didn't have those, then I'd sleep more or I'd train less. So it's just trying to balance recovery. I think that's what usually sets the good athletes from the great, is them knowing how to balance that recovery.
Awesome. Yeah. On the note for all of you guys, I think some of you guys have gotten in a great habit of letting us know how you're fueling, but not getting in the habit of letting us know how much you're sleeping. And so I would definitely maybe let your coaches know if you're having a couple 5-6 hour nights. That really does make a difference in how we would advise your training, so we can stay ahead of any fatigue that is about to come. So,
and some lifestyle factors, like little changes, like these glasses. I can't take them off because my headphones are on. Just block some blue light. So it's not that blue light's so bad, it's that overexposure of blue light is the problem. So we're in this society today where it's all blue, getting a little bit of sun exposure, full spectrum, and we're basically infrared depleted. So like I have a model right here of near infrared light on me right now when we're talking, because it actually displaces the blue light on top of actually blocking the blue light on that ocular tissue cascade. So little things like that, they make such a big difference long term.
Amazing. Alex, thank you for your time. I think everyone would agree that was really beneficial. I will be asking you for some of those terms that you said that sounded important, but I missed them completely. And I feel like I want to look them up. So I appreciate your time, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Next Sunday, we do have a call. We have one with a mindset coach. So we haven't done one of those calls for a while. And I think that would be really helpful for you guys going into the season. I hope you guys have a great week. Bye.
Thanks for having me on, everyone.
Alex, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having. It's nice to get caught up,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're due for one of those proper catch up here soon as well. So
right.
You seem to be doing really well.
Couldn't be better. We have baby 4 coming at the end of May. So we're super excited. Yeah.